series of applied spirituality and sustainable development policy towards an integral approach. Today's lecture, we are talking about public policy for sustainable development, a Gandhian paradigm. We are trying to connect and put forward the rationale for the role of spirituality in sustainable development goals, and under this particular lecture we are trying to put forward the case of Gandhian paradigm. We have seen that the development, we have been talking in the last lecture about the development models that have been implemented and that have been experimented over the period of time, such as invisible hand, microeconomics and macroeconomics, models of microeconomics and macroeconomics, as well as we have seen the Keynesian model working and how the Keynesian model failed to provide the equal distribution of resources to the poorest of the poor, and subsequently they failed. In addition to this, we see that the political economy becomes the culprit, and it is guided by the vested interests that inhibits the flow of well-being to every section of the society. When we actually implement and execute a public policy, it is not the politics, it is not economics, it is basically the political economy that takes the front seat. It is the political economy that decides, and that decides on the basis of vested interests, that who receives how much. As a result, the entire development models which we have come across, they have been unsustainable. They have led to an unsustainable, unprecedented growth. Various dimensions or aspects of unprecedented, unsustainable growth can be accumulation of more and more of wealth, unprecedented possession of resources, unchecked capitalism that breeds more and more economic growth. Unsustainable economic growth also means concentration of wealth in the hands of few, and it also means political economy that plays a critical role in disrupting the equity or the distribution in the economy. So these are various aspects or dimensions of unsustainable economic growth from the and this is all resulted which we have evidently seen in the past. The long run viability and prospects of economic growth are delimited by the ecological imbalance and growing inequalities associated with it. So therefore, we have the others, several economists and there are several social scientists who have pointed out that how the entire system has failed to achieve the sustainable goals, development goals. The two economists, Lucas Chancel and Thomas Piketty, have contended that the gap between the rich and the poor has exacerbated specifically from 1980 to 2014. We also see an extensive literature on growth theories that confirm that rich are becoming more affluent and poor becoming poorer, which is increasing inequalities is what we have seen, and several economists and studies have pointed out as their conclusion. The famous Kuznets curve, which we all talk about in economics, which is about an inverted U curve, which postulates that inequalities will first increase and then they will decrease over time. There are other famous economists who have determined the convergence will happen in developed countries while divergence is in less developed countries. Convergence primarily refers to catch-up effect. When the technology is introduced in the early stages of development or industrialization, developing countries, they gradually catch up with more advanced nations. It takes time. The underlying motivation here, after all the evaluation of economic models, we come up with the fact that the underlying notion that we talk about in the Gandhian economics framework is not to attain higher standards of living, but to achieve a minimal possible respect for human and social values, not even the human but non-human species or entities also. So once we have this connect between social values and human and social values and respect for human life as well as non-human life, once we attain that, that will become our main objective and motive of the entire process. It is mainly the basic objective of decent work and economic growth, which we talk about in SDG 8, Sustainable Development Goal, that is number 8. That is what is being addressed in Gandhian economics. Gandhian economics is guided by evolved consciousness, and it realizes the truth of the existence and therefore seeks the ultimate satisfaction of human race altogether. So this concept of SDG 8 can only be attained and can only be in the ground level or in the true sense be attained when we adapt and implement and execute economics of Gandhian thoughts. Therefore, an evolved and enlightened soul seeks to dwell in the world comprising of non-violent and peaceful social economic settings. In that kind of a setting, only one can visualize SDG 8. Uncontrolled and unprecedented consumerism is in no way a method to achieve individual satisfaction. Now, the concept of individual satisfaction again needs to be modified and revisited from the Gandhian framework and from the spiritual framework. The underlying phenomena of human wants and which are unlimited and the resources are limited, is completely resolved and unfolded by the distinction between wants and desires. The elementary distinction here between the wants and the desire itself unfolds the basic framework of wants. The distinction provides a necessary rationale for the ethical wants. Thus, the elementary purpose of the entire economy is to attain the welfare of the whole community and not just the individual desires. One needs to distinguish between an individual desire and the ethical want. When the entire purpose of all humans is to attain ethical want, then the ethical want is connected with the whole of community, not just a selfish vested interest of individual. So one needs to have an inner upliftment to visualize and realize this concept of ethical wants. One needs to go deeper into oneself and uplift themselves to realize that concept of ethics, value judgment, and the want that emerges from the entire phenomena is something which is referred to as ethical want. Therefore, the state's ethical responsibility is to ensure human dignity. In this framework, the ethical responsibility of the state, which is there for non-possession, which is there for the service, and it is only ensuring the human dignity, and it is eliminating inequities and inequalities of all types of ownership and income in the whole society, that becomes the ultimate aim of the state. Role of the state is limited to provide and ensure dignity of human. Minimum elementary inequities of ownership are removed in the system. Finally, all the economic system intend to attain inclusivity and economic equity and equality by narrowing the gap between the society, between the rich and the poor, social class and economic class, and all the gaps are eliminated. When a public policy is designed based on these fundamentals, automatically all the gaps and all the deviations and divergence between the social diversions and social exclusions, economic exclusions, and the gaps between the rich and poor are systematically eliminated. There is enough for everybody's need and not for everybody's greed. A remarkable statement that therefore that concept of trusteeship that originates from the statement and the concept of non-possession that emphasizes that possessing the material things that are not needed is similar to stealing. The concept of trusteeship, when adapted by the state as a public policy, it takes it as the responsibility and not as a possession. It takes it, the best alternative is to own resources and not to own the resources but behave as a custodian of the entire nature. In this context, the trusteeship model that is a remarkable breakthrough in the whole of economic thought. It unfolds the dilemma of the economic problem of unlimited wants and limited means. It is this trusteeship philosophy that is based on the notion of one must think about the world that one will not see in future. Once this philosophical attitude and attribute is adapted in the system framework of the public policy, then the policies that emerge from this paradigm are the policies which will be achieving SDG 13, which are aligned with the Sustainable Development Goal number 13, which is climate action, Sustainable Development Goal, as they have been prescribed by UN Foundation SDGs. SDG 13 mainly focuses on strengthening the resilience and adaptability capacity of climate related hazards and natural disasters, integrating the climate change measures into the national policy and strategies and planning. SDG 13, which it seems to be something which can be achieved from the external and outer world by creating policies for public and strategizing the resources of the country, aligning the resources of the country to achieve all these targets of resilience and controlling the natural disaster. Actually, it cannot be achieved without the component of or tool of spirituality. Notion of sarvodaya is something which needs to be discussed maybe from the view of egalitarian concept that originates from the self-transformation of individuals. Unless these characters or the attributes are adopted in the system of policies, one cannot visualize to achieve any climate action or any kind of SDG 13 and other SDGs. The concept of sarvodaya is a remarkable holistic concept that is considered the most democratic, decentralized system of functioning. In one of the sayings of Gita commentaries, one can observe that strong influences are there embedded in Gandhian understanding. Also, Ruskin's notion of on unto this last is something which was embedded and is reflected in Gandhian thoughts. When the individual experiences self-transformation, the notion of welfare all pertains to not only the welfare of human race, but it is for the whole of the ecology that manifests. So one's individual experiences this inner upliftment of towards the consciousness, inner upliftment towards or transformation towards higher consciousness. It is then one can realize the interconnectedness to human and not only onto human to non-human species. Gandhi embarked upon Sarvodaya. A Sarvodaya was a kind of a movement in addition to what was going on as a movement of non-violence. It was parallelly going on. So one cannot achieve one single target without taking into care and addressing the challenge or the other. If one is seeking inner upliftment, one cannot ignore what is happening in the outer world or it's the other way around. If one is trying to achieve some goal of development process, development goal in the outer world, one cannot ignore the inner goals. So they have to go hand in hand. There has to be a sync between the inner goal and the outer goal. The word Sarvodaya mainly reflects the progress of all, upliftment and universal upliftment. The underlying principle of Sarvodaya is that the good of individual is contained in the good of all. So the entire notion depends on connects the individual to all. Similarly, it connects all to the individual. So it's the two-way process. We cannot exist and attain our aims, and our goals cannot be designed devoid of the other person. So this is the main fundamental aspect of interconnectedness. If we seek to achieve one individual goal, we cannot achieve it without coordinating with the other goals. Sarvodaya stands for the progress of all. Individuals that should follow the law of non-possession is one of the aspects of Sarvodaya. Desire is for the greatest good for all, serves as a plight for the poorest of the poor, originating from the fundamental principle of Sarvodaya. So these are certain fundamental aspects that the main purpose of Sarvodaya movement is to visualize the whole society based on the cooperation and inclusivity while leading to the economic and political freedom. Sarvodaya rejects private ownership, and it was considered as instrument of exploitation. Owning any private property is considered as exploitation and the source of social and economic discrimination. Therefore, the concept of Sarvodaya addresses, one can say, SDG 1. So, one can link the concept of Sarvodaya directly achieving the Sustainable Development Goal number 1, which is no poverty. The other sustainable development that it achieves is SDG 10, which is reduced inequalities. Another SDG that is taken care by this concept of Sarvodaya is SDG 3, which is good health and well-being. So one can see that all the three concept SDGs which we struggle to achieve and which we through our policies we aim to achieve by setting the targets, they are all embedded under the concept of Sarvodaya. And what is the Sarvodaya concept? It starts from the individual upliftment, a spiritual upliftment which is akin to one individual self, and later on it multiplies to the self of the whole universe, that is the superconsciousness. The concept of Sarvodaya was promoted by several eminent leaders like Vinoba Bhave, Dada Dhanakari, and there are others like K.G. Mashruwala and others who are in 1950s. They were placed in 1950s and 60s, long time back. One of the most remarkable Sarvodaya movement was considered as Bhudan movement and Gramdan movement. It was considered as land gift movement initiated by Gandhian Vinoba Bhave concept in Ponchampally village. The movement synchronized a cohesive technique which will embark to the notion of commons and common ownership related to the natural resources, and specifically it was dedicated to land. All the common resources and land ownership was given to the private ownership was given over to the common land, and it was then later on distributed. The movement achieved a remarkable success in empowering the landless laborers, emphasizing the significance of limited resources such as land and the role of ownership in attaining the inclusivity and social economic welfare. The wealthy landowners were persuaded to voluntarily give their proportion of land to the landless people. This movement was not only ensured the economic freedom or equality to all, economic inequality was reduced and inclusivity was attained and realized, and also it embodied attribute of non-possession among all individuals in the society. Once you attain and manifest this attribute of non-possession, then the entire philosophical attitude towards life is guided by the principle of non possession. The aim of life will be revolutionized and it will then be transformed not for the materialistic ownership, it will be for higher and higher attainment of higher and higher consciousness. Consequently, based on spiritual inquiry, the notion of Gandhian thoughts constitutes a comprehensive socio-economic framework for the society, a framework that incorporates elementary dimensions of human development, covering and seeking all essential spectrum of social infrastructure. It is this framework that will attain various touch, or it will affect, impact various aspects of infrastructure in the sense of education, healthcare, safe drinking water, sanitation, creation of sustainable livelihoods, women empowerment, care for the vulnerable and marginalized sections of the society, animal care, plant care, and resistance towards all disasters, climate related disasters, etc. It is this robust, resilient infrastructure that can result only when a self is evolved or transformed. It is implementing this framework, and as we have said, all these aspects which we have talked about, they are all the aspects of 17 SDGs being laid down by UN. Implementing this framework as a roadmap of public policy would not only provide a robust public policy regime but also ensure attainment of sustainable goals for the whole nation. Non-cooperative movement, we have seen another concept of remarkable concept proposed by Gandhian thoughts was the satyagraha. We have seen that on 4th September 1920, it was initiated by Mahatma Gandhi. It was based on self-governance, seeking to withdraw its support from British rule or reforms. Quit India movement was launched in Mumbai, and it was a historical movement where Leave India movement was embarked, demanding the end of British power. Relevance of Gandhian Satyagraha as a tool or technique for a successful revolution not only enlightened the inner consciousness of Satyagrahi but directs the whole society towards attaining the ultimate truth or reality. So such movements are not for your own upliftment. They basically have power to revolutionize and provide a driving force, basically it's soul force to the whole of the nation, to whole of the humanity, to whole of the universe. These are universal revolutionizing tools. Bardoli movements of society which enabled and facilitated the nationwide freedom struggle. Another example is the Champaran Satyagraha, which was a famous uprising that took place in Champaran district of Bihar because against the farming of indigo, one of the examples of Satyagraha. Civil disobedience was another example, which is another method, civil disobedience under the prescriptions of Satyagraha. In this case, the state is considered as a mere formal structure and participants of the protest begin to destroy the unjust laws. There are other satyagrahas like Dandi Satyagraha, which was an act of non-violence which under a campaign against the taxes and which was against the salt monopoly of Britishers. These were considered as a constructive program, and constructive program which is the foundation of Satyagraha, on which the entire success of movement is rested. In this present era, it is such kind of movements which transform and evolve oneself first, and then that translates into revolution of the whole of mankind, is something that needs to be integrated under the public policy, and that needs to be given space in the public policy in order to provide them a spiritual understanding of the public policy. The disconnect that has happened between the human and the human needs and human goals, and human within human, there a flight from a distance that has occurred between the true self and the humans, that gap needs to be fulfilled by the spiritual understanding. In this present era, the world is full of hatred, racism, and conflict. Global oppression is defined in the form of soft power, if not the hard power. The war of technology and market in the name of climate change, if not the arms and the weapons and sacrifice of human value system in the name of politics and subjugation. Such a world order once again needs a revolution to render humanity on the path of truth and larger goal, that is discovering the final ultimate truth. This particular chapter, this is our contribution in the book, which it is a contribution. This particular lecture, which today's lecture is in the form of a chapter in a book, which I will just tell you that this is a contribution towards Gandhian philosophy, which originates from the spirituality to examine the hypothesis that is plausible relationship between spirituality, public policy, and sustainable growth. We have seen that the Gandhian philosophy that values individual and his relationship with his true self becomes instrumental in the ethical transformation. The evolved consciousness, which we have talked on in this lecture, it becomes the driving force for the perceived paradigm shift. Moreover, the self-transformation, manifestation, and realization of truth and love are deeply embedded in the Gandhian notion of Satyagraha and Sarvodaya. In today's lecture, we concentrated and we went deeper and explored the fundamentals of Satyagraha and Sarvodaya, how they both have attempted and when adopted in the system could achieve the several sustainable development goals of UN. This chapter is chapter number 11 in the book, which is there on the screen, and if you want to go through this chapter, there is a written chapter in the form of a public policy and sustainable development goal, a Gandhian paradigm. Thank you so much for having a patience.